Hi, this is a video about making compression specimens for member tests. The compression specimens are going to be a little bit more complicated than the tension specimens because we have to make them strong enough to support compression. Notice this one's already been broken by a test. But essentially we're making little rectangles or squares out of file folding material. And I'm going to show you how to make those right now. So first thing I'll say is plan the size of your specimen. So for example, this one is 10 millimeters on a side, whereas this one is 10 millimeters by 6 millimeters. I had to plan that ahead of time, and I'm going to show you how to do that first. The way we are going to plan that is I'm going to take the material that I'm trying to use. This is going to be my long side. This is going to be the length of my specimen. And I'm going to go down and think about the four sides of my material. I'm going to work in pen, and I'll tell you why in a second. So let's say I'm going to try to make a specimen that is 10 millimeters by 6 millimeters, like this one here. I'm going to make sure that my ruler is straight against the edge of the folder, and that I'm starting at 0. And then I'm going to make a mark at 10 millimeters. Then I'm going to make a mark at 6 millimeters. So one side is going to be 10 millimeters long, and the other side is going to be 6 millimeters long. Now, the next mark has to be 10 millimeters away from the last mark because it's going to match up with this side. Remember, I'm making a rectangle here. So I'm going to go from 16 all the way to 26 and make another mark. Now the last side has to be another 6, so I'll go from 26 to 32 and make my mark there. Last thing I need to do is make a gluing flap because I'm actually going to glue this all together. I would recommend making the gluing flap as long as this one because you're basically going to glue to the opposite side, or maybe 1 millimeter shorter. So this is 10 millimeters long. I'm going to make my gluing flap exactly 9 millimeters long there. So I'm going out from 32 to 41 millimeters. So I've got a bunch of marks here. I need to make those marks again over here on the other side of the folder so I can make my lines for both cutting and gluing. So I'm going to go 10 centimeters, 16 to 26, up to, oh, I'm sorry, that's not 26, 16, so that's not going to be a mark, 10, 16, 26, then 32, and then 41 for my gluing flap. So I have the same, forgetting this one, which was a mistake, I have the same lines drawn on both. Now, I'm going to turn this around because I'm going to both draw lines that I'm going to use to fold on and draw lines that I'm going to use to cut on. So I'm flipping my ruler over so the ruler is as close as possible to the material, and I'm going to use my pen, not a pencil, but a pen, to make a line that connects these first two. Notice I'm going back over this a few times and I'm pressing really hard. I'm trying to actually indent the material so it makes it really easy to fold. So this is a very, very, very dark pen line because I'm trying to squish that paper together to make it easier to fold. Let's do that again for this line. Do that again for this line. Even though I'm going quickly here, I'm being really careful to make sure that my ruler lines up perfectly with the lines I've drawn. And I'm making sure that I make those lines nice and dark. And then lastly, this is going to be for cutting. So I can draw it with a pen if I want to, but really I want to use the X-Acto to cut the very, very last marker, making sure that this is straight up against the ruler, and I'll do it again to make sure that I get it. Perfect. So Now that I've got this, I have a choice. I can either cut this lengthwise to make a really short one, or I can leave it long to test a long specimen. I would recommend starting with a long specimen because you'll find that they are a little easier to break, and it'll give you an idea about how strong these things can be. So I'm actually gonna leave mine long. It looks like it is, if I measure it, I didn't actually measure this before, but this is about 18.5 centimeters. You'll probably want to know exactly how long this is and maybe make it like a round number if you're interested in that type of thing. I'm going to fold these on the pen lines. That's why I made my pen lines so dark, is so they would be easy to fold. And then this last one is going to have to glue into the inside of the box. I recommend 2 different types of glues that could work here. It doesn't actually have to be that strong, so glue stick works pretty well. If I just put a healthy amount of glue stick on here and make sure that that's all pretty well covered, I can then go through and fold this together so that it makes a nice rectangle. Now, to get this nice and firm, I actually recommend flattening it and pushing it together so that it's nice and flush and the 2 sides are about the same length. Folding it allows me to actually push this tight so that the glue makes a strong connection. You'll want to check that both sides are consistent, that you have a real rectangle that goes all the way through, but this is a successful member that I can test. I would want the glue to dry a little bit before I actually test it, so what I'm about to do is probably unwise because I might see something just break, but I'm going to test this essentially by pushing it against a force scale. Again, you will be surprised at how strong these things can be, and you'll have to be a little bit clever about how you make the test. For example, you may want to test it vertically by pushing down. You may want to come up with a way to actually squeeze it with something that standardizes that. I'm not going to worry too much about that right now. I'm just going to show you what I've got by holding this here. I won't even use that ruler. I was trying to use the ruler to make it a little flat against here because I found that that makes a cleaner test, but you'll decide whether you think that's actually important. So I'm actually just going to do this by pushing it, just a lot like we did with the other test, and it'll be your job to look at the value of the force meter to see what it becomes when it finally fails. So this just failed, and you could see the value on the force meter. I didn't actually notice it, but when this has broken, we know that it has failed, and you'll be especially interested to look for a relationship between the length of the member and how strong it is. That is this shorter piece stronger or less strong? That is, how much force does it take to break it? This will be an important consideration for you in thinking about how to design your bridge. Last thing I'll mention, you will also want to try different dimensions here. I mentioned that you want to plan this ahead of time. So try a few different examples, 10 by 6, 10 by 10, maybe something even wider, to see how that all affects the strength of each individual piece.